Hello, everybody, and welcome to this latest in the ValuesJam guest session series. And Celine, it's great to have you here. So to kick off, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the great work that you do?
Oh, thank you, Alan. I'm really happy to be here and excited about this conversation and the cards. So I am an engagement practitioner and consultant and advisor. I work from France, but basically globally after a long career in the corporate world, which got me think about the ways in which we could improve collective work and leadership in particular. And there's so much we can improve in this era of networks and communities and that make work better for people, but also that deliver better business results. And so I recently wrote a book. It's called Dare to Unlead. It's a little bit of there's a little bit of a play on word in the title, as you understand. And my point is to suggest that by unleading, by inviting more people into a collective exercise of leadership, we can actually yield much better results. So that's what I do in short. And apart from that, I row on the river close to my home. I'm a big rowing fan, and I have a family, and I love books.
Fantastic. And the thing about unleading and getting more people involved, ever since I started my career, I never really understood why leaders thought that they should try and do everything
Mm,
and everybody else just to follow along. Where
yeah.
it's just like it's simple maths, isn't it? If you've got an
Mm,
organization with, say, 1,000 people,
mm.
if there's just a few people at the top trying to do stuff, then you're not going to get as much done as if everybody was involved.
Yes, you're right. I think it's probably human nature. We want to be useful. We feel a sense of responsibility, and that's great. It's all good intentions, I think, in the very beginning. No one has decided to, rule the world and have everybody else as servants. I don't think so. I think that's a rarity. It should be. But it's really a sense of, oh, I'm in this position. I've been appointed, named, leader of that organization or that team. And so I need to demonstrate my worth and I need to bring, a contribution. And so that's where it's, there's this movement from I'm responsible to let's get things done, and in times of urgency and complexity, and it's sometimes faster to just take decisions
Yeah.
oneself or with a small group of people who think alike and just bring everybody else along. That's what we feel is a shortcut, but
Yeah.
indeed it's a shortcut that is not sustainable and not very efficient, because
Yeah.
then you need to build all the engagement and have people adopt your solutions. And so there comes all sets of internal communications and control mechanisms, etc. It's very heavy, it's very costly. When if you take a little bit more time in the beginning to build engagement upfront through co-creation, then you don't have all these issues later on in the process.
Celine, this is weird because just yesterday I had a 31 practices co-creation session with a client. So there were about 50 people on the call. And it's exactly like you say, the one way is for, and I said this yesterday, I said some organizations, the senior people think they're the only ones that are clever. And so they go away and they create this thing. And then they spend the rest of their lives trying to convince everybody that it's a good thing, but nobody's interested because they weren't involved. Whereas if you get everybody to co-create it in the first place,
Mm.
when you launch it, you just say, guys, this is what you said. So can you just do it now? And
Mhm.
that is just so different.
Yes, it's very different. But then, of course, it takes certain conditions for people to want to
Yeah.
contribute,
Yeah.
authentically and significantly in the beginning. If it's just one time, if it's just lip service, people sense that. We're not stupid. We understand who really invites us into the co-creation and who doesn't really.
Yeah. And just final thing on your book, is it on Amazon or where can
It
people?
is. Yes, it's on every good platform,
Right.
in bookstores as well. Yeah.
Great. All right, so let's get into the Values Jam. This is the Values Jam card deck. And so what I'm going to do is tip out the cards. And how many times would you like me to cut the deck?
All right, let's go for, can you do 8?
I can. So is this 8 piles?
Yeah, right. I
Okay.
used to live in China, and 8 is a very lucky number. There.
Let's see. There's always the exception that proves the rule, right? All right, so I've got 8 piles in front of me. So would you like pile 1, 2, 3? Which number?
The eighth, of course.
The eighth. Okay. And there are just 4 cards in the eighth pile. So 1 to 4.
2, please.
Oh wow. So this is what you've chosen.
Oh! I love that.
Now this is one of my personal core values. So
Oh.
I should be happy with that, right? And we should enjoy this conversation. So the first question is this: what does enjoyment mean? And what does it look, sound, and feel like?
Hmm. Enjoyment means taking pleasure. It means feeling, for me, it's associated to a sense of curiosity and openness and growth. Not that I'm, obsessed with intellectual growth, but I love to, and that's part of the enjoyment. I love to wander into uncharted territories, uncharted for me at least. I love to be in mastery of a sport or a practice or whatever, but I really enjoy taking a glimpse, having opportunities to discover to expand my fields, to at least try or be introduced to new things, new ways of thinking, new ways of new stuff, new sports, new whatever. So, and I really enjoy that. Enjoyment for me is also fundamentally linked to presence and connection. And although I enjoy very much being on my own, especially when you have a family, and a demanding business, etc. Being on my own is really a luxury. Listening to the music I want and just doing my stuff. It's a luxury, but I really enjoy being with the people I love, the people I admire, people I'm inspired by, and this connection, this togetherness is providing me a sense of it's not comfort, I would say, but a sense of bliss, happiness, and I believe it's. Life is short. That's obvious. But we're passing through. We're passing through, and the most, if we can make the most of this short time we have on Earth, and enjoy things, but also spread joy as much as possible, rather than spread bitterness or anger, and I know that's it's a bit easy for me to say that because I live a very privileged life. I am part of those people who enjoy their lives, and I know that for many others life is not that comfortable. So I keep that in mind as a reminder that enjoyment is accessible to anyone, but it's also a privilege in a way, huh? Life is tough for many people, for the youth, we've been through COVID, and we have all those this surge in mental illnesses and so on. So it's hard. It's hard for many people, and of course, economic conditions are hard for a lot of people around the world. So, um, with all that, I believe it's part of. I believe it's a responsibility that I have, among other privileged people, to not fuel the hate and the discontent and the bitterness. So I pay very much attention to what I say, what I share on social media, what I try to I try hard not to fall into the us versus them mindset, for example. I try not to fuel divisions. I believe our world is already suffering from this fragmentation that we're experiencing, and this fragmentation goes against the togetherness we need to solve some of our mega challenges, the mega challenges of our times, you know, global warming and so on. So I wish there was more joy in being together and in feeling that, yes, we can achieve great stuff by sticking together, instead of the short-lived enjoyment of you know, criticizing people or finding blaming people for, you know, problems, for example. And I think a lot of the problems that happen to us stem somehow from things we are involved in as actors. We're not just victims of what happens to us. You know, we play a part in the choices we make every day, at work, outside of work, etc. So I try to live a conscious life. It's not the best life, but it's a life that brings me joy.
Wow, you've uncovered so much in what you've just said, and there's a number of things actually, and probably some of the things that I was going to say and then I've forgotten because I was listening to what you said afterwards. But one of them that I really want to comment on is your comment about privilege, because I used to work in a five-star hotel with a golf course and country club, and to be a member there, you had to pay. I think it was £10,000 to join the club, and then you had to pay £6,000 every year for your membership. So pretty expensive. And so most of the people that were there were what you might call privileged. But I remember walking through the bar quite late in the evening, and one of the members was at the bar, and he'd obviously had far too much to drink. And I was just chatting with him, and he shared that he had properties outside of London, in London, and I think it was Monte Carlo as well. And then he had, you know, sports cars, he had a boat. But then he said, but you know, I don't have any children. I've never been married. I don't have a partner. And then he said, and for my friends, I'm not sure if they are my friends or whether it's my money that is the reason for the friendship. So basically, he was miserable, right? So that's one example. Then the other one, in contrast with that, I was speaking to a guy that I know. Well, actually, I know his mum. So he's around about 18, and he lives in Sao Paulo. And he was telling me about this really expensive apartment block that had been built. And to give you an idea of how expensive, each apartment had a swimming pool balcony. Maybe not big enough for one of your rowing boats, but anyway, it was built next to the slum area. And he said that he had friends that lived in the slum area. And he was describing how he had really close friendships with those people and how they had great times together, even though they had very little in the way of money or food or clothes or anything, you know, all of that sort of stuff. And he was saying, do you know, I wonder how happy they are compared to a kid that's living in this block who maybe they're a single child. Maybe they never go out because they're scared. Maybe all of their life is on social media or on a computer or games. And so he was saying, who's got the better life actually? And so that your comment about privilege made me think about that, because I think sometimes, undoubtedly, privilege and money gives opportunity, but for some people, actually, it brings not such good things as well. And also, when people have less and lead a more simple life, they actually enjoy themselves more somehow. What are your thoughts on that?
I have mixed thoughts about it. I think on the one hand, yes, what you say is absolutely true. For example, I spent 4 years in Vietnam between age 23 to 27. And at that time, Vietnam was a very, very underdeveloped country. It was still under US embargo when I arrived. It was very hard to find, first necessity products. It was a very, very, very simple life. And it brought me a lot. And I established wonderful bonds with people who, were fantastic and who did enjoy the simple life they had, despite all the things that were lacking, that were missing. But they had, they had ways to enjoy their life very much. And I was shocked and a bit disgusted when I came back to France for the first time after a full year spent in Vietnam then, and it was Christmas time. And I remember my sense of disgust in front of all those shops, shops in Paris that were full of products, full of stuff, 99% of them being, not that much useful. I remember going to a patisserie in Paris and hearing an old lady buying cookies for her dog, like expensive cookies at this patisserie for her dog. And I was like, oh, that was horrible. I felt this scandal of excessive consumption and capitalism and so on. On the other hand, I feel that today life has become so difficult for many people that they are easy targets for populists and for those extreme movements that capitalize on anger, bitterness, jealousy, etc. And which bring absolutely no constructive solution whatsoever, but they just reap the rewards of that bitterness. And I was reading a statistic just in an article just this morning saying that in France, a high proportion, something like 70% of people who are happy with their lives voted for Macron in the last elections, while 80% of those dissatisfied with their lives voted for Le Pen, the far-right political person. And this brought me back to an experience that struck me a few months ago. I was asked to rate hospital I went to for a little something, and they wanted to hear about my experience, as they do for all their customers. And so, at the very end of all the questions, there was one question asking me, in general, how happy are you with your life? And I understood. So, and I had to rate from 1 to 10. And I understood through this question that there would be a sort of how can I say, they would discount my evaluation a little bit if I said that in general I'm very happy, and
Okay.
yes, I had a very good experience with this hospital, so I rated them very, very high in all aspects. And I understood with this last question that they would apply a sort of algorithm or something to bring it closer to, I don't know, to bring my evaluations closer to those applied by people who are generally unhappy with life, and they would do the opposite thing for them. And that made me think that my perception of reality is certainly tainted by this general optimism that I have, which it's I'm very happy about it. It's a strength. It has helped me through this adventurous journey a lot, and I owe that to probably to my parents, who gave me a very strong, solid, foundation, and lots of love and security. And I don't doubt, my own identity, or I'm full of doubt like everybody, but it not to the point that it undermines, my foundations. I know my foundations are very solid. And but then I've got I was lucky enough to go through a good education and to have a good job and to have, I have savings. I'm not super rich, like, I don't buy expensive cars and I don't have properties in Monaco, but I am solid enough that I don't have to worry, day by day about the food I will buy or that kind of things. And but that gives me a certain perspective on things, which is not the reality. There's no such thing as the reality anyway. But I mean that my perspective on things can be radically different from the one of somebody with low resources living in a difficult area, city, and subject to, I don't know, racism or other discriminations, or obviously from someone living in Ukraine under the war. And I'm wondering how can we build bridges between all those realities? How can we maintain a sort of commonality so that we can aggregate our strength and build solutions for our world today and tomorrow, instead of each of us, pulling apart and seeing the other as an enemy,
And I think to your point there, it's very easy for us to exist within our own bubble.
Yes.
And to not have very much understanding at all of what else is happening outside of that.
Yes.
And I was talking to somebody about this last week, actually, because there's somebody I know who, funnily enough, she's in Brazil as well. She runs a virtual exchange program for schools. So you might have a school in Paris that is connected with a school in Nairobi or maybe just outside. And so the students are able to get a first-hand insight into the lives of their peers who are living a completely different life. Mm. And I think that's to your point about, how can we build bridges and how can we create understanding and then how can we create solutions. This is a bit general, but I believe that young people are inherently good and kind. Mm-hmm. But because they have no means of really knowing what's going on, and so therefore nothing is done about it, actually, and they don't have the motivation to do anything different. So I think this program is fantastic, because imagine those kids in Paris seeing lives being led in a way that should not be allowed, accepted, and then them feeling the motivation to do something about it, either on a small scale now for them as children, or maybe, as they become adults and have a chance to have a bigger impact. Yeah, and it's an area I think about quite a lot, because most of the work that I do is in the values space, right? But frequently I kind of challenge myself, because I'm like you, I'm privileged enough to be able to give thought to values and all the rest of it. But, if I was in Ukraine now, I think I'd be rubbish. I just don't know how I would cope, because you have to make decisions around, do you stay or do you go? Do you tell your close loved ones to stay or do you tell them to go? And these are kind of like heartbreaking, life-destroying, possibly,
Mm,
decisions that people have to make. And here's us talking about enjoyment, you
mm,
know.
mm. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. And yet thinking about them doing a little bit of something for Ukraine, for example, is a source of enjoyment. It's a drop of water in the ocean. I'm aware of that. Uh, but at least we're doing something. We're thinking of this country and its people. Um, I am lucky to have a friend in Ukraine. She actually is now living in London, but I had established this connection a few years back when I was invited to speak in remotely in a conference in Ukraine. And so for me, it's not just a country; it's someone. It's someone that I can relate to, and there's a lot of feeling in my relationship to this country, its people, and to this war. And yeah, how can we build possibilities, more possibilities for people to not be crushed by this conflict, but instead emerge even more vigorously. I'm astonished by the capabilities, the resilience, the creativity of all of them. It's really a big lesson. We were talking about privilege, and this is a huge test to people's um, values, moral values, sense of generosity and courage. And I have a lot of admiration. What I so something is just anecdotal, but I see all those articles praising the leader, the chief, the head, and that's normal. And I'm very I pay a lot of attention to the rest, because we know it's a system. The fate of Ukraine doesn't depend on its president alone, even though he's an amazing person. But I don't want to fall into this worship of heroes, which is something that is quite detrimental to the collective, I believe. It makes the collective more fragile if we depend on a single person. That's what happens in the field of work, in the field of leadership. And by the way, when we were talking about creating those keeping people together, this commonality, this sense of togetherness, I believe there's a huge opportunity for work to be doing that precisely. The workplace is maybe one of the only places where we get to meet people who are very different from us, who have different political views, or different, who are of a different generation, a different whatever educational background, and so on. So there's a huge opportunity to recreate the a strong, a dense and diverse social fabric here in our workplaces. We've lost this possibility in our cities, for example, where we now live in certain areas with people who are more or less like us, in terms of revenues and so on. We've lost a lot of this ability, and especially after COVID, where we we have we've been maintained in our close circle for a long time already now. And it's hard to reach out and reconnect with the diversity of the world out there. So I think businesses could possibly do even more in terms of diversity, connecting the system to more of itself, so that it's more aware of its own diversity, and it's where diversity isn't seen as a foreign element against which we need to defend ourselves, but is seen as something valuable, interesting, and a source of insights.
Yeah, and so on a couple of things on Ukraine, and I'm not that close to it, so this is kind of not very well informed, but just intuitively, it feels to me like Ukraine in, say, 50 years' time will be looked back on as making a strong statement for good,
Mm.
and it will be celebrated
Mm.
all over the world.
Yeah.
And like you, I'm in awe of the way people have behaved in solidarity
Mm.
in that situation. And actually, in the workshop that I mentioned earlier, one of the values that we were talking about was courage, or having being courageous. And we use a metaphor to help the creative thinking process. And they chose the people of Ukraine, and
Mm.
thinking about, so what behaviors have they displayed?
Mm.
And your point about leadership, I think that is a good example of the not the hero type approach to leadership, because I think the reason that they've been able to have so much unexpected success is that it is a really strong societal fabric, rather than a weaker one where the leader has to tell everybody what they need to do. That's
Mm.
not needed to happen there.
Mm.
And the behaviors have been aligned,
Mm.
without the need for instruction. I think that's part of their success, actually.
Mm. Mm.
And then on your point about the workplace and diversity, you've reminded me of a client recently who said, "Why can't we celebrate our difference?"
Mm.
And I love that thought.
Mm.
Rather than you having to kind of justify it or accommodate it or whatever it is, it's like, why don't you just flip it completely and just
Mm.
enjoy it?
So here I've got something about, and I mentioned that in the book, celebration of our differences is very good until it becomes a pure celebration.
Yeah,
Until it becomes, we're just proud of, we're walking through this, in this diversity march with the banner of our company, but there's not a single diverse person in our decision-making bodies. You see, so I think we need to pay attention to the diversity washing, and it's very good to have people of all colors and sizes on our corporate internet sites, websites and brochures, but it's even better if we have diversity, including social diversity, and this one I think is very much overlooked, and that's a pity. Social diversity, like diversity in levels of education and social background and so on, in the decision-making processes,
yeah,
ideally in profit sharing as well, right? Because currently things are pretty unfair, and I think that is fueling the anger and the distrust, and it is very dangerous for the whole system. But yes, celebrating diversity, yes, absolutely, but making it a source of insights and engagement and cohesion in the organization is even better.
yeah, definitely. And your point about social diversity, I relate to, because I wasn't from a very privileged background. And I remember at school, my peers talking about how they were going on holidays to foreign places, and how
Mm.
they were going skiing, going to concerts and festivals.
Mm.
But the skiing in particular, I just remember not understanding the words. I
Mm.
just didn't know what they were talking about. And
Mhm.
the interesting thing when I look back on that was that they were not intentionally
Yeah.
pushing me away. They just were ignorant, or
Mm.
I was ignorant and they were ignorant that I was ignorant. So
Mhm.
there just wasn't a connection. So
Mm.
I think you're absolutely right about how we we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
And the more informed we can be about those
Mm.
situations. Another topic in that area is etiquette.
Mm.
So what's the I don't know whether you've seen the movie with the character Borat.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So,
They are hilarious.
so a bit crazy, but
Yeah.
you know, in those movies, I think what they demonstrate is how you can behave in a totally inappropriate way from the perspective of the people that are used to something different.
Mm.
But it's done with total innocence because
Mm.
you just have no comprehension.
Mhm.
Um, Now we've gone whoosh, haven't we?
To
Now,
Borat.
let's come back to that second part of the question about the metaphor, because
Mm.
what does enjoyment look, sound, and feel like?
Mm. It sounds like a great playlist on in my headphones. It tastes like a good dinner with friends, with wine, with good wine. It looks like beauty. It looks like something beautiful, like something that pleases the eyes. Um, so it looks a lot like art, which is intriguing and thought-provoking. It can look like a great book as well. I've got my favorite ones are just in the back, close, because they give me a lot of energy. Um, yeah, it feels like energy, I would say. It feels like really like positive and sustainable energy that brings you further. It looks like fireworks as well. They're beautiful. They illuminate the sky and they bring this sense of childhood innocent joy, without thinking through too much about what's happening and how does it work, etc. I think losing this innocence, going too much in the how, why, how, what would happen if, etc. Going too much into speculations and calculations and is stripping us, stripping this joy away from us a little bit. So yeah, enjoying something good and nice and colorful in good company. That's what enjoyment looks like for me.
Yeah, and you've made me think about how enjoyment can be so varied, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And it was when you mentioned fireworks, because it made me think of, and earlier you mentioned, you said about how being on your own is really special.
Mm-hmm.
And so enjoyment can be sitting in silence, actually, on your own, or it can be at a football match with thousands of people cheering your team.
Yeah.
And they're both really enjoyable.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
I love the use of the word energy. I think that is, for me, that's what enjoyment is, because when you see either somebody or a number of people enjoying themselves, you can, most of the time, you can kind of feel this energy. And actually, what is that? Because
mm,
it there's not really any more energy than when they're not enjoying themselves, but
mm,
it's a powerful force, actually, from
mm.
nothing, maybe. And
Yeah.
maybe is multiplied when people are together enjoying. Um, and then the other thing that comes to mind is a smile.
Mhm. Mm,
If people are enjoying
mm,
themselves, then I tend to visualize
mm.
smile.
Yeah. Oh, I want to speak about this solitary enjoyment experience of writing a book. Some people ask me whether I enjoy having written a book, and I say, yeah, I'm very happy about the product, the fact that there's a book. I still even find it hard to believe, but the process of writing has been such a source of joy for me. It was hard, it was excruciating, it was long, it was tedious. The writing itself lasts about a year, every weekend, every evening until 1, 2, 3 a.m., half of my days, it was painful. It was a bit painful for my family, but they supported me as much as they could. It was great. But the process of going deep into, and I had this wonderful music, Phil Glass and Craven Falls and all sorts of great music, and I was just diving into knowledge. It was amazing. I love that. I love that, and I almost miss it a little bit. Now this process is over. I'm not ready to write another book soon, but I remember this being a highlight, one of the highlights of my life, really. It's going deep, deep, deep into this knowledge, exploring all those new fields, realizing, you have an intuition and you go into that field and you realize that, well, some people have explored it for 200 years, and there are amazing books written about that, and I fall into every rabbit hole I can find. So it was very hard for me to refrain from being too curious. I accumulated thousands of notes, and then there's this work of bringing back, creating meaning out of all this, stitching stuff together, weaving threads. That's where I think my art resides. It's not really about creating a whole new concept, but weaving things that may have been disjointed until now.
Yeah, no, so you're making me think about the process of writing books, and a bit like you, I think the thing that I really enjoy is taking a big concept, simplifying it, and then kind of dissecting it and presenting it in a way that has a flow so that people find it easy to follow and understand.
Mm.
And also I've enjoyed the blend of kind of operational reality plus academic theory and references.
Mm-hmm.
But where I will disagree with you a bit, I hated the final piece of the process.
Which was?
The proofreading.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
And it just took so long. And it's like, oh my God, and we missed this. It's like, but I've learned to get less hung up about that, because somebody told me that even in J.K. Rowling books there are errors.
Really?
Yeah. Now
How
I don't
many?
know whether that's true.
I didn't find them. How many books did you write?
3 so far. And I wasn't just you just said there that you're not ready soon to write another book, and I had decided that I wasn't going to write anymore. But we've just created some customer experience training to deliver as a program. And of course, books are a really great way to put a lens on the work that you do. So yeah, we've got another book that will be published in spring next year, which is how you supercharge the customer experience. Because just quickly, because we're not here to talk about this, but customer experience is often regarded in a silo in organizations.
Very much.
And I strongly believe that the key to great customer experience is to understand its connectedness to the whole organization rather than treat it in isolation. But yeah, so we're doing that. But the I'm not looking forward to the proofreading part. And what about the other side of the coin for enjoyment is where have you noticed a lack of enjoyment?
You mean for me?
Anything.
Anything. I'll start with my own experience. I lack enjoyment when things become too repetitive and become a bit boring. That's how I would put it, or too comfortable. when things are, always the same, going, back to the same places for holidays, etc. Even though they are great places, but then it feels a bit dry. It doesn't, fuel me enough, I would say. So I like to, yeah, keep this sense of progress in a way,
Okay.
discovery and journey. And yeah, I hate to think that the journey is now, over and that things are going to be stable until the end of my life. That's not, what I aspire to, obviously. Um, so yeah, this sense of and the dryness of some aspects of corporate world as well really suck the joy out of me completely. The automation of people.
Yeah.
You see, this is something ugh, I really feel we are bad robots. I mean, some people seem to thrive in that environment, and I look at them as, they're really weird. I find it hard for me to thrive in an environment where everything is regulated by numbers and processes and milestones and all this engineering mindset, which has brought a lot to the world. We need to recognize that absolutely. But this extreme emphasis we're putting on math and engineering skills, etc., to the detriment of social skills,
Yep.
of human skills, as if they were the soft skills, that's reserved for a few dreamers and idealists. It doesn't work. It doesn't work anymore, because we live in a world that is profoundly, I mean, extremely complex. Everything is relational. Everything is connected to one another, and if we keep pushing aside those relational skills, these emotional capabilities to relate with one another, if we don't cultivate that enough, and instead feel that everything can be solved by algorithms and machines, we are running to disaster, I believe.
I think this is, I enjoy this area immensely because when I was in my career, it was kind of, you had to be aspiring to be this perfect thing that never made any mistakes, and that's how you could be a good corporate person.
Mm,
And nobody really smiled very much. It was all about getting the job done and doing it really well and all of that sort of stuff. But I think, just as an example, I think LinkedIn over the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, maybe it feels like,
mm,
has changed enormously. LinkedIn 5 years ago was like the corporate world that I just described, whereas now it's becoming a lot more human.
mm,
And your point about the kind of engineering and machine approach
mm,
really amuses me, how we use the management language of like human resources,
mhm,
human capital.
mm,
And it's like, are you forgetting the fact that we're human beings? It's
mm,
like really quite weird.
mm,
Um, so the corporate one, yes, I think I've experienced a lack of enjoyment there. The other comment that comes to mind actually about enjoyment relates to, you said just now, until the end of my life.
mm,
And recently I've been thinking about this. This sounds a little bit morbid, perhaps, but over COVID, I came to realize that we're less dependent on time and place than we previously thought we were.
mm,
And then I thought, well, just because we die,
mm,
does that mean that that's the end of our positive impact in the world?
mm,
And so I've started to think about how I can continue a positive impact and maybe spread enjoyment after I've gone. So
mm,
I'm looking at creating some form of fund to help boys from less privileged backgrounds from my home city, to provide them with probably two things. It looks like it's narrowing down to. One is mentors. So people that came from a similar, less privileged background, but now have wisdom and connections who can guide these people.
Mm.
The other bit is just some money. So whether that's to have a good laptop or whatever it's for.
Mm.
So I'm looking at how can I continue to spread positive vibes, even though you're not physically present.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah, but a bit, maybe
Mm.
it's a bit morbid.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. When I think about that, I feel that a part of the job, if we can consider that as a job, is to educate good humans, and that's what I'm trying to do with my two kids. Trying to share values of connection and curiosity and a humanist approach to life, hoping that they will not feel blinded by their own privileges in life, being, able-bodied and having grown in a comfortable family, and loving family. So that's the sort of mini legacy I'm trying to share. And of course, there's the book, but legacy is not so important for me, and not it doesn't matter much. I feel that I'm just passing through,
Yeah,
and I'm trying to do the best as I can in this short moment. Yeah, and not fueling all the negative aspects that are so much more easier to fuel, really.
yeah, yeah. So I'm conscious of time, and the Values Jam always draws to a close with the same or similar question, and that's this. What are you encouraged to do differently about enjoyment as a result of our conversation?
Oh, that's lovely. Well, I'm enjoying to think about it more instead of just, welcoming it, but think about it being maybe a bit more conscious about what really brings joy, what doesn't, and in order to do more of what brings joy, not just to myself, but to people around me. So yeah, I think this conversation will stay with me for a while.
So could I just press you on that then and ask you, what is the first practical baby step towards what you've just described that you can
Mm,
take either
mm.
today or tomorrow?
Maybe I'll write it down. I
Okay.
like, yeah, I like to write as a way. I mean, writing is great for thinking. So maybe I'll write not necessarily a list, because that's a bit dry. That's a little bit what strips joy out of me. But writing a few sentences, a few, words, images, something like a mood board, you see, in a way.
So an enjoyment mood board. And
Yes,
when have you got time to be able to do that?
maybe over the weekend.
Okay.
Hmm.
Well, that's lovely. And
Yeah.
mine's very simple. I'm cooking confit of duck this evening for dinner.
Mm.
So I'm going to find some nice vegetable accompaniments to go with that. And I'm going to spend a bit more on a bottle of wine than I normally would.
Haha.
It's my-
Awesome. We're actually going to a fancy restaurant tonight with my
Are
husband.
you?
Yes, we are.
Well,
For
enjoy
for
that.
no special occasion, just the pleasure of enjoyment.
Exactly. Well, we went to a small town on the south coast of England where they had a week in celebration of scallops last weekend. So we
Wow.
went to a couple of restaurants and they had scallop menus. It was
Mhm.
fantastic. And then for some reason, there's jazz that happens in the town as well.
Oh.
So it was just and like you say, not for any special occasion. It was just good fun. So, Celine, thank you so much for your time. You're a
Oh,
qualified values jammer now.
thank you, Alan. And I'm glad I had this card. That was very enjoyable.
Bye.
All right, thank you. Bye.